Welcome to the business end. Today's guest spent 16 years at one club in one city through promotion, relegation, near misses, and a complete rebuild, and still left as a record appearance maker and record try scorer. That combination of longevity, loyalty, and output inside a single system is almost unheard of in the professional game of modern rugby. Topsy Ojo grew up in Sidcup in Kent, the son of a surgeon and a lawyer with roots in southwest Nigeria. He attended Dartford Grammar School, captained the first 15, and joined London Irish Academy in July 2003. He made his senior debut against Wasps in 2005. What followed was 14 years in the Premiership, 301 appearances, 80 tries, and an England debut in 2008, where he was the first choice team against the All Blacks, which Martin Johnson was in charge of. He lived through the height of the golden generation of London Irish, a team that reached the Premiership final in 2009, lost it 10-9 to Leicester, and he stayed through the decline that followed through relegation in 2016 in the Championship, and then back up again. Since retiring, he's built a broadcast career that includes Six Nations for ITV as an England reporter, Premiership rugby coverage, Rugby World Cup 2023, Amazon Prime Video, TNT Sports, and BBC Radio 5 Live. He's also still involved with London Irish as trustee of the London Irish Foundation, and he's a qualified coach working with young people at St John's School in Leatherhead. Topsy, welcome to the business end.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a funny one when somebody reads your bio like that. You're like, oh, okay, you've managed to get a fair bit done, which is quite nice. But thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
We had to get you on the show, Topsy, because we're completely jealous that you scored 80 odd tries for London Irish, and I don't think me and Fitzy have scored one. Have we, Fitzy, for the first team?
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself, Moo. But Topsy, welcome.
Anyway.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that. Topsy, welcome to the business end, and yeah, what a fabulous career. Let's get into it, Topsy. You spent your entire professional career at London Irish, 16 years, one club, 301 appearances, in an era where players were moving constantly. What actually kept you there, and at what point did staying start to feel like a choice rather than inertia?
Yeah, it's a question I get asked a lot. London Irish is my club. You come through there as a young man, and you spend those early years of your adult life, growing up there. We had some very, very good times. We started to gather success, and we built a squad that it was just enjoyable to be around. I think at the point where, contracts coming up every 2 to 3 years, and you're thinking about, do I stay? I think I probably came through in an era where more people stayed rather than left, especially in the beginning. But it's kind of around, I'd say, maybe the midpoint of my career where there seemed to be a lot more volatility in the market. People seem to be thinking more about going abroad to France or moving clubs and trying to maximize the short career that you get. Like I said, I feel blessed to have carved out the 16 years that I did, but I know for a lot of other people, it's not like that. You don't get the choice. It's not yours. It's the club's, or injury has an impact. So for me, where there were maybe opportunities to look elsewhere, I guess the decision is, right, A, are you happy? Are you playing your best rugby? Can you see that continuing to happen at the place where you are? I guess those kind of middle years, 2008, 9, 10, where my career peaked, being on the verge of the England squad and being involved in the England squad, you want to stay around and try and experience more of that as well. I'd also not long met my future wife as well. So then there's decisions around, right, where do you see our future? Where do you see your family's future, and things like that? So for me, the choice to stay was always the right one. I guess at the peak where maybe it was more my choice, it was the right decision for me. Further down the line, maybe where the club wasn't as successful and maybe there weren't as many opportunities, you still ask those questions. Am I enjoying it? Is it the right environment for me? Am I going to continue to develop as a player? And if the answers to all those are yes, then you stay. I know there were finances in France to be thrown at people, and people definitely took advantage of that, and as they should. It's a short career. The other thing is moving, unless the money is substantial enough, it costs a lot to move. So actually the net gain sometimes isn't worth it. But for me and my decision, it always felt at the time the right one to stay. And, you know, I guess we can always play the game of what if, but I think I wouldn't be sat here talking to you right now if I hadn't made all the decisions I'd made up to this point, which included staying at London Irish. You know, I don't think I would have been able to build the career that I've built if I hadn't stayed at London Irish. At least I don't know that.
It's a great club for sure. But you brought up what ifs. So what was the closest what if for you moving? Was there one, or was it always when you went through your process, always an open and shut case?
So the closest was after the 2008 Heineken Cup semi-final, where we just lost narrowly to Toulouse. Again, I know we lost the game, but one of my favorite days in an Irish shirt. But yeah, the conversation after speaking to some of the other guys in particular, you know, I think there was an opportunity there to explore France. I think they'd seen the way that the team performed, myself, Silosi Tanguy-Thackenbauer, Dylan Armitage, and it was like, right, you guys need to come over to France. And obviously Dylan did in the end, and Silosi moved on eventually. But that was kind of, I guess, the most prominent moment to do it. But again, you know, I didn't know at the time that you're just about to play for England and you want to continue more of that. So actually, if you move, does that help or hinder your chances? I can't remember at the time if you had to still be in England to play for England, but that probably wasn't far off. So again, there's all these decisions. And I guess for me, it was, right, I've created this based on what I've done at this club.
Mm-hmm.
So the hope is that by staying, I'll be able to create more of those opportunities going forwards.
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
all
It's
worked
something
out.
to be said for loyalty. And obviously, as you know, Topsy, we speak a lot about pressure. So I'm going to ask you about pressure in perhaps a different circumstance to compared to elite sport. So when you're getting offers from France and no doubt a lot more money to go there, did you feel how do you deal with the pressure of making that decision? I mean, you've explained it. Obviously, you had quite a logical thought process behind it, but did you ever feel pressurized? And how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I did because it's a big decision. You know, you I guess talking about leaving somewhere that you've been as a kid going into adulthood, somewhere that you've had some success in an environment that you've enjoyed with good people around you. But I think ultimately, yeah, it comes down to kind of that logic. You park emotion aside and you park the numbers aside per se, and you break it down, right? What will this opportunity present for me? Is it the best for me? Is it the best for my family? Can I see this continuing to provide success for me long term and helping me go on to achieve the things that I want to achieve? You might not tick all of those boxes, but if enough of them are in your favor, then you can make a decision. But likewise, you know, like I said, that's the same when you're thinking about staying. Am I happy where I am? Am I in a place that I'm going to continue to develop and grow and improve? Is it going to create opportunities for me further to, yes, also earn more money because you can use that as a bargaining tool, as leverage. But then also, like I said, the people around you as well. It was a point where it wasn't just about me. It was about the others that I was going to need to be able to provide for. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I broke it down in the end. And ultimately, at that point in my career, the best decision was to stay.
Yeah, I mean that's a very important message to employers as well when they're employing people. People are happy. Why are they going to leave just to earn perhaps more money across working for a competitor? You know, obviously it probably won't be as big a gap between perhaps English rugby and French rugby at the time. But if people are happy, they won't leave. There's no reason for them to leave. So it's an important message out for employers for sure.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, value is a huge thing. Like, you know, people want to be valued, they want to be appreciated. Yes, they want to be remunerated as well. But if you create an environment and a culture where people are happy, that's when
Yeah,
you get people that will spend 10, 15, 20 years at a business because they don't need to leave. Everything that they want in a job, in an environment with an employer or as an owner, they have where they are. You know, there may come a point naturally where, you know, you want to seek a new challenge, but if you can provide enough of those yeses and whys, people will stay because they feel valued.
absolutely. And that's an important message for younger players as well, Topsy as well, that are coming into the game.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say so. I mean, the game's moved on so quickly now. And like I say, I think maybe my generation was probably the last of the ones to stick around for a long time. But actually, you look at what some clubs are doing now. They're bringing through big groups of young, great English qualified players. They're able to keep them together for longer because they're happy, they're valued, they're paid well, and they enjoy the culture and the environment. It's allows them to perform and be their best. Look at what Bath are doing. Look at what Northampton Saints are doing at the minute. Bath talk a lot, Johan van Graan, their coach, about culture. He almost talks about that first, about culture and people before the rugby. So you get those two, right? You get people in the door, you get them to buy in, and then you go on and you try and create something special with it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like Henry Slade, who's probably a classic example of that at the moment, isn't it? At Exeter, I don't know. He's been there since he was in the academy.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And he's seen all his mates leave.
yeah,
I think there's him, there's Luke Cowan-Dickey's gone, sorry. Jack Yandel, the club captain, I
yeah,
think are the two longest serving. So you know, that also makes it harder because you see so many of your mates move on for various reasons.
yeah,
And I can testify to this. You're the last one left. So you're like, why am I the only one still here? But then it's a decision for you. You can't make decisions based on what everybody else does. If it's the best decision for you to stay because it ticks all the reasons you want to, you do it. So sport, business, like I say, we mentioned Henry Slade, it's worked for him. So despite all his mates leaving, mates that he's grown up with, it's worked for him. It's continued to help him play for England. It's continued to help him have successful moments at the Chiefs. And we'll see what he does. He's just kicked them into a European semi-final. So it's it's about you. What's best for you, and you make the decision accordingly.
yeah, absolutely.
So before we change gears here and talk about your England career, you just mentioned the semi-final. What's your prediction for that?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I mean, funny, we're talking Champions Cup. I'd picked to lose to win it. So I'm now going to roll back and say it's Bordeaux's to lose. I can see Exeter doing it. I think, again, they figured themselves out. You see, last year was tough, but they've almost bounced back this year. Another year together with a similar group. They've made a couple of really good signings, but again, you now see when you build a culture and the environment and you allow players to explore things, to try, to fail. I look at their fly half, Harvey Skinner. He was kind of given the keys to number 10 last year. He'll probably admit that he had a bumpy ride, but actually you see him this year now, he's flourishing. So, and that's part of it as well. A bit of faith, feeling valued, feeling wanted, being given opportunities to play well and not play well, but bounce back. And I'd say now he's in a sweet spot.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to 2008. You just scored twice on your England debut against New Zealand. One off an interceptor with Dan Carter, another on a foot race. Pretty incredible. 2 tries against the All Blacks. You then played in the second test, and that was it. 2 caps, never recalled. What happened in the months and thereafter? How did you process the gap between what you produce, which is pretty special, and what came next?
Yeah, an interesting period. I mean, playing for England is a career highlight, and you kind of, that whole period was a bit of a whirlwind. From my initial feeling for that summer was to go on the Saxons tour, which was the A team. That was kind of the objective. But, as happens sometimes, a couple of injuries open up a slot. And like I said, we had that 2008 Heineken Cup semi-final. Irish finished the season very strongly. I think we made the playoffs for the first time that year. Yeah, we did. We lost in the semi-final away at Leicester. But the club was on an upward curve. And after that semi-final in particular, the conversation, I remember Brian Smith, our coach, basically saying that I think you've done something special here. And yeah, I think big things could be around the corner. So eventually the phone call comes from Martin Johnson saying you're going on the senior tour. And you kind of start to play the mind games in your head of, getting selected on the tour is one thing, but obviously you want to play. You don't want to be the bag holder through the week. But like I say, a couple of injuries probably opened the door. I mean, that happens sometimes. And then you get out there, you see your competition, you see who's about, and you actually start to think that, okay, I might have a chance. And then I think on the Tuesday, the squad was named, the magic bibs come out, and you find yourself in a starting shirt. The bibs always tell the story, don't they? They never lie. Um, but yeah, an incredible 2 weeks. Like I say, despite the results, to make your debut against the All Blacks, I'd almost say that year previous, I'd spent watching them all on TV and saying, remember some of my first rugby shirts were Auckland Blues shirts and Crusader shirts. Because, we kind of in the era where it was all on Sky Sports, you watched it. But yeah, you go from watching it on TV to the Hackers 20 meters away from you. There's Dan Carter, there's Richie McCaw and co. But you embrace it, you enjoy it because, you're there to try and win a test match. And yeah, obviously to score 2 tries on debut, incredible. To play the 2 tests, and then you hope for more. But unfortunately, it doesn't come. Like I said, I knew that there were some players to come back into the fold, some senior players, and I was probably going to have to fight even harder to be in and around the squad. Um, I'd say the big incident that probably put me right on the back foot was injury. So around the February, March time of the following season, took a big tackle from a Tuolangi and ended up with an issue with my knee that basically involved surgery that was going to keep me out for a minimum of 6 months. So I had the option to tour the following summer, but the conversation was, look, your knee's no good. I mean, it had ruled me out at the back end of that season as well. So London Irish, when we went to the Premiership final, I basically missed the back end, didn't play in the playoffs, didn't play in the final. You sat on the sidelines just wanting to go on one leg and think, I can do something, I can help my team get over the line because you're so close to the summit. But yeah, so we lost the final on the Saturday, and I was in hospital on the Wednesday getting my knee operated on. That kept me out for 7 months. Came back, played 6 games, hurt my knee again, was out for the rest of the season. So I pretty much missed the whole of the 2009-2010 season. And then once you come back the next year, it's World Cup year, and there's a queue of people who have gone past you and also trying to behind you, trying to get in that spot. So obviously fought as hard as I could to get back in, made it back into the Saxon squad for the following summer. But yeah, like I say, I was down the depth chart, and see at that point, London Irish then weren't doing as well in the following years that came. And I think that was kind of the period over. I think there's a realization when you know that I think it's going to be more difficult for you to get back into there. I could list the names of players that came through at that time, from then Chris Ashton, Christian Wade, Matt Banahan, Hugo Monye, etc., even Dylan, like coming through. So competition, I would say, was stiff. And yeah, that was probably the closest I got back to being involved, part of the A team. But yeah, never any further. So it's one of those, again, if you said, would you have loved more caps? Absolutely. Would I have loved to have played in the Six Nations? Yeah, I would have loved to. But again, depending on how you see life and how you see things, you don't often get to play that game, And again, the 2 caps gave me memories that nobody else will have. It puts me in a class of people that nobody else can be involved of. There's only a certain amount of people that get to play rugby for England. They get to score twice on debut against the All Blacks as well. So I take the things that I did in the short time that I had with it, and like I say, it's all that stuff, good, bad, indifferent, has put me in this chair right now doing the things.
I was just going to say, and you mentioned at the start of your answer there about a bit of luck, right? A little bit of luck going in, and then obviously a little bit of bad luck afterwards with your injuries and so on and so forth. But very, very balanced view on it. I mean, these things happen, and you've got those incredible moments and memories. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, and it's playing against New Zealand there, facing the haka.
Yeah.
As well, which
2
is
tries,
one of the
brilliant.
ultimate experiences. Yeah. So just quick question on mindset, because I'll try and very quick question as well. Like, so when you weren't getting selected for England, after New Zealand. Where was your focus? Was your focus on playing for England, playing for London Irish, or just playing well yourself? Honest
Uh,
answer.
uh, yeah, a bit of the second two for sure, because I mean it is your cliche, but every coach, every selector will say to you, just go back and play well for your club. So I would kind of, as hard as it is, you see the squads being selected and you're not in it, like you can't control somebody else's opinion of you. All you can do is your very best day to day in training and in games. And I think if you can be honest with yourself and say, I'm doing every single thing I can to get selected, I'm doing everything I can through the week to play my best rugby, train my best, play my best, then you're doing your bit. And it will still be incredibly frustrating, because ultimately you want that prize. But I think how you maybe take some comfort from it is knowing that you've done everything you can, everything you possibly
Mm,
can. And if it's just then somebody else's decision, you can almost make peace with that. You might not like it, but you can only control so many things. So that was kind of how I approached it. That first autumn where, you've just finished the tour, you're back, you're like, right, when's the next opportunity? I would have looked at what got me there in the first place. And it was being part of that team, performing well, being part of the top mix. So, competing in semi-finals and finals and going the distance in Europe, playing in those bigger games and in those bigger opportunities was what put me on the path to England. So that was the focus. Try and recreate that as much as you can. Focus on that, and then hopefully the big prize might come.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a very important point because you could spend forever and a day focusing on the end result rather than the individual things that make up the performance. And I suppose that's how you take pressure off as well by doing that. So going back on to London Irish, basically we touched upon this, the great side as it was building between 2006 and 2011. Then in a very short period of time, that group fragmented. What did that feel like for you in real time, dealing with that, seeing all the players leave?
Yeah, I can't lie. It was difficult because I mean, you want the success that the group had created previously. You know that groups change every single year, so you know it's not going to last forever. But having been, like I said, so close to the summit, you want to stay there. You want to go again. You want to go again. But as you said, slowly but surely, people started to leave. We all get a bit older. Opportunities come for different people that they want to take. London Irish, probably similar for you guys, very multicultural club with players from all over the world, and eventually they want to go home. So, slowly and surely you see people leave and you completely understand their decisions. But I guess as the one that's still there, still trying to fight on with the club and keep it at that level, is it difficult? Yeah, absolutely. Because you then see results not go the way you want them to. You then see the club fall down the league table. And as we know over the years, that eventually led to a relegation. So yeah, you almost try and recreate the step to success that you had previously, but then very soon I think you figure out that what worked for the previous group isn't going to work for this group. I'd say that sweet spot that we had, particularly around kind of 2006, 7, 8, 9, I'd say we had as much fun on the pitch as we did off it. Great balance of Irish, English, Samoan cultures all blended together. We kind of bounced off one another. We learned off each other, but it worked for us. But then, like I say, as people leave and the culture changes, you have to restart that process. You have to figure out, right, what do we need with this group? What's going to work to take this group forward, and how do we build that? So, as you do every single year, you set goals, you set up your leadership groups, you talk to your new coaches if the new coaches are in, and think about, right, how do we want to take this thing forward? You lean on what you've done in the past, of course, because that helps, but ultimately it's all about the future now and what's next. So I think then you try and be part of those conversations because, again, as the one there, you want to keep things going. You want to aspire to achieve and be great and have success. And you want the guys coming into the building who probably a lot will have come in based off what they'd seen the club do previously, the style of rugby that they played, what they'd heard about the club from other people. You want them to experience the good times as well. But I guess as you learn, sport, it's it's not always that simple. You've got, at the time, 12 other teams all trying to do the same, all trying to build something special, all trying to win, all trying to aspire to be a great side. Um, and it doesn't always go your way on any given Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. One team wins, one team loses.
So, I mean, I presume some of the coaches were changing then as well. So, I mean, how did you adapt when you got new players and a new coach, and you've been there for, 7, 8 years at the time? How hard did you find that adapting to a new regime, so to speak, when you've been there so long?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult, because voices are changing kind of every 2 to 3 years. The direction that they want to take the club in, the style of rugby that they want to play as well. I guess you have to put some trust and faith in the leadership in that, look, the board and the people in charge of the club would have done their due diligence and they would have hired the right guy. So once the hire is made, you almost have to back them and say like, right, you're in charge of my fate per se. The way that you set up the culture of this team, the way that you set up the style of play, the way that you build this thing. Obviously, I have my part to play, but that's going to dictate whether we are successful or whether we fail. And, I think in the period that we're talking about, obviously Brian Smith and Toby Booth, I think Brian Smith took the England job. Toby Booth became head coach. Glenn Delaney had a spell as head coach. Tom Coventry had a spell as head coach. Declan Kidney, Nick Kennedy as well. So you're talking about, how many I've named there, maybe 6 head coaches from a period of 2008 to 2016, maybe 16,
Wow.
17, 18. So all of a sudden, now I say it out loud, that's a lot of turnover. And I know some would have worked with each other, but it's effectively, you're talking more than half a dozen head coaches in a short period of time. So that's going to mean adjustment year on year on year. It's new people in the door every 2, 3 years as well. So you have to keep that rebuilding process going every 2 to 3 years, which again is something that, looking back now, was probably really difficult because the personnel are changing so much that actually to generate some form of consistency that is going to allow you to be successful, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, so like I know you're a very humble man, but when the coaches came in, because you've been there for so long, did they look at you as like the flag bearer, as a guy that was going to set the standards, almost like the glue to for the newer players to look to?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, yeah, I definitely, as I'm getting older in my career and someone that has been there, you definitely take on that leadership role. You have conversations about what is working, what isn't working, how we kind of, again, I say recreate, well, but how we create a successful environment. But I guess the other thing with that is you don't always want to look at what's worked previously. So yeah, I would have input into, how we do things going forwards. But I think also there was an element of embracing new ideas that came from
Absolutely.
different sources. So whether that's new players, new coaches, I think you mentioned Ben Franks, but when Ben Franks and James Marshall walk in the door from Super Rugby and New Zealand All Blacks, you think, right, these guys have got some serious IP. Let's tap into that and let's use that. When Tom Coventry came in and Clark Laidlaw, you think, okay, these guys have had successful careers in Super Rugby and all over the world. So actually, maybe some new ideas might help us generate some success. But ultimately, you try. You can't guarantee yourself success, and but you lean on that as well because, like I say, there's so many revolving doors, so many people coming in and out of the building that you can't keep doing the same thing. As much as I might say, this is what's worked, let's keep doing it. You might all of a sudden have, like I say, you have a group of Kiwis coming in that say, oh, this is the way we've done things. So maybe this has worked. And you say, okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah, it's a
And
great
it
mindset
takes
you
time.
have there. Yeah, takes time. Yeah. What I mean, obviously you've been at the club for so long. If new players were coming in and you felt the standards weren't high enough, how did you feel about that, or how would you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we tried to have a fairly robust senior players group who, like you say, standards are huge. And actually, I remember when Brendan Venter came back to the club the first year we were relegated, he looked at and people talk about it all a lot, like your non-negotiables, just things around work rate. So you would take a kickoff or a kick chase from a box kick, and he'd say, is everybody sprinting as hard as they can to get up the pitch or to try and win the ball back? Because on the board in the gym, I have all your speed scores. So I know how fast you are over 40 meters. So if that kick goes 40 meters and you're not there, I know you're not working hard enough. And that is the bare minimum. So when you talk about standards, it is, I mean, people say it all the time, but it is, it's how fast do you run? How quickly do you get off the floor? Those kind of work rate pieces, that it's the bare minimum that gets you in the fight. And then you add all the bits and pieces on top of that. So that's definitely one thing that, you try and embrace, you try and take on, because like I say, you have those honest conversations with yourself, but actually, are you sprinting? Yes or no. There's no gray area. It's yes, I am. No, I'm not. Okay. If you are, you'll get there. If you're not, I know you're not. So you work on that, and then we can have the next conversation. But yeah, you try and, like I say, as a more senior player, then yeah, you try and set leadership roles for sure, because you know whether you know it or not, and maybe I can look back on it now. The younger guys coming in look up to you. The other guys coming in the door might have, obviously seen you play, or might have watched you from their other clubs and said, okay, yeah, he's a player. And then you meet properly and you get to know each other properly and you build more of a mutual respect. But you want to put your best foot forward, because ultimately, like I say, it is my club, and I wanted it to be as successful as possible. I wanted people to come and care and invest in it as much as I did, which they did, absolutely. We had some brilliant people come in and out of that building, and I think that's London Irish throughout history. But ultimately, you want the success as well. You don't want to watch all the other clubs have success and win and look down on you. But that wasn't our story.
So let's talk about the academy. You said the academy kept giving you hope. It's had a storied pipeline of great players, to name but a few. Watson, Joseph, Corbacero came through around the same period that you were there. But you also said the club wasn't in a position to compete at that level that group deserved. What does where does that failure actually sit with you? And was it a structural problem, a succession planning problem, or something else, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's it's a difficult one. I'd say the answer probably lies right in the middle. You learn way more about these things, I think, once you're long retired, and once you get to understand a bit more about how sports clubs operate as businesses. Um, and I think ultimately at that point where, again, you're talking about how do we recreate success, and the academy was one of them. You've got a great catchment area of schools and clubs. You're bringing through really talented players, and the guys you've named. I think we wouldn't be far up an all international 15 of players that came through the academy and then left in that period too. Guys that went on to win step, to be British and Irish Lions. But as I understand it at the time, we almost changed the way the club was run. So we weren't offering the money that was available elsewhere. We didn't own our own stadium, which meant that we weren't making as much money. I know lots of clubs weren't making money. I don't think any made money, but one of the key points was not owning your own stadium meant that, I think I'd have to fact check this, but it was something silly. Like when we were at the Medeski, for every pound that we took, we'd only make 20p. Or it was something silly like that, where you go, well, hang on. So being here, being in a stadium that we don't own, we're just not making money as a club. So somebody in the financial office has to make decisions on, we've got this great young player coming through who now warrants salary X, which is being offered elsewhere, and we're just not going to pay that. And if that's the way the conversation goes, the guys will leave. At the point where the club wasn't doing as well, so you touch on succession planning, guys' heads will be turned by offers elsewhere, by people saying to them, look, if you want to play for England, if you want your career to push on, you're not going to do it at London Irish. It needs to be elsewhere. And that messaging isn't something that happened in that moment. It's something that was probably over a period of time. So you can see the direction that the club is going in. You can see that, yes, they peaked in 2008, 9, 10, but now there's a bit of a decline. If you want to kick on as a young player, you need to go to Bath, you need to go to Saracens, you need to go to, at the time, Wasps, to go on and be successful. So it's, I guess, the side of sports business that you learn further down the line. Like I said, I wouldn't have been aware of this at the time. Again, you appreciate people making decisions for their career, but like I say, when you have players of that talent, that quality, coming through your academy and leaving, and not just one of them, a lot of them, you start to think there must be a reason. And as I guess I understood later, it's financial. It's financial. It's performance based as well. But it's those questions, like I say, I was maybe asking myself, am I happy? Is this the best environment for me? Can I see myself having success further down the line? For me, maybe it was 3 yeses, but for these young boys coming through, I'd say they definitely love the environment because they all came through together and they're still all good mates now. Success on the pitch, probably not as successful as we could have been. And can they see themselves succeeding in the future? They're probably being told no. So if it's 1 yes and 2 no's, the decision's going to be to leave. And I think, yeah, that's where things changed over those years for London Irish.
For sure, and we spoke about this. I don't know if it was before we came on there. I mean, if a team's winning, that monetary incentive it isn't quite as strong because you are happy. You're part of that culture. You're winning trophies. You're getting to finals. But if it's not there, you put those separate things into the pot and make the equation, and it becomes harder to justify staying.
Yeah. I mean, just touching upon that, and leads right into the next question. I think it's more of a discussion point as well, but you're probably one of the main guys you can ask here about this. So, 2009, you're winning. 2016, you're relegated. You're playing down in Cornwall. I think you talked about that, and it's like, complete shock probably to you where London Irish has slipped to. When do you actually think the rot had set in? And I'll ask Fitzy that as well. As well, when do you think the rot had set in? Were the foundations ever there? I'd be interested to see. And where did you think you first saw it? Think, wow, actually, we're going downhill here.
Yeah, that's a good one, because it's one of those, actually, when you're in it, you don't know you're in it. Like, I look at that squad that we had and I think back to it, and was it good enough to stay up? Absolutely. But did we perform well enough to stay up? No, we didn't. And though you speak a lot about pressure, um, again, frustratingly for me, I picked up a shoulder injury in 2016. I think we were away at Worcester. I basically dislocated my shoulder towards the back end of that season, so I missed the run-in. And we had some big games. I remember going up to Newcastle, I think it was, in a sling, saying, right, okay, I'm injured, but I'll do everything I can to just try and help from an off-field point of view. Couldn't help get the boys over the line that day either. And you start to think, how did we end up here? We had a horrible run of form. I think we went 8, maybe 10 games losing in a row. And like I say, at the time when you're in it, you are working hard every single week. You're doing everything you possibly can. You're coming up with a great game plan. You're having a brilliant week's training. And then you get to the weekend and you lose. And then you start again, same thing, and you lose. And you search and you search, you scratch away, you think, like, right, surely this is going to turn. And it doesn't. And, the question around when the rot set in, I mean, I probably almost look back 3 or 4 years before that in terms of, again, leadership, the direction of the club as a whole. Are we investing enough generally? Do we have the right mix of players and coaches? the answer would probably, I think, the people that made the decision. I don't know who was responsible for that decision, but they would have said yes. These are the right signings. These are the right investments to make. Players, we will have to take. We take responsibility because I think about it all the time now when I watch sport, and people call for the manager's head and all of that, and I'm like, yes, the managers and coaches are responsible for the culture, the style, the strategy, but once you're on the pitch, they can't tackle, they can't ruck, they can't not drop the ball. That onus is on the players to deliver to their standards. And we just didn't do that consistently. So it's one of those where I guess you look at the business of the club and say that had probably been set in for a while. Like I say, I think, knowing what I know now, you just can't be a successful business in sport and not own your own stadium. But we had the personnel within the room to at least not go down. And that's on the players, the coaches, everybody involved in that. We didn't deliver enough to get the success that we wanted.
So let me ask Fitzy that same question, and let's take into account where London Irish now, where the pro club are now. Obviously, they're not around. Fitzy, where do you think the rot set in at London Irish?
Well, it's interesting listening to Topsy there. I
Yeah,
can hear a lot of similarities. What
yeah.
we went through a generation before, and it takes a bit of time to incubate a side. We had some great coaches, and I think you make some really valid points there in terms of what the coach can't come on the pitch. The work's either been done during the week or it hasn't, And I always felt with the guys that we had looking after us that there was that preparation and that work to a lesser or greater extent. And we had a great group of young players. I think most of us were 21, 22, 23, 24, and need a little bit of time to incubate and bed in, as we talked about there. If you're always changing things every couple of seasons, and it comes back to, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I certainly wasn't aware of it at the time. And it was an earlier incantation of professional rugby when we were involved, but it does come back to that business, and making those hard choices. And if you don't own your stadium and you're looking, can we keep this young player that's probably not quite there now, but in 18 months is going to be a rock star? Can we keep this guy who's playing international rugby at the moment as the top of his game, and ultimately and effectively, if you haven't got the budget and you're not generating that money, it's got to come from somewhere. And you can't keep. You have to make a sacrifice somewhere. So yeah, it's very, very interesting listening to you, and I can see a lot of the same similarities. And it's not just a London Irish thing. You see this across professional sport, professional rugby. That business component of it is critical. It's got a balance.
Yeah, I think two things. Number one, obviously, when the side's winning in 2009, and perhaps the finances aren't really there, and the glue that's holding it together is the winning, and that's what's stopping people leave. And then you get two or three people leave, and the rot starts creeping in. Perhaps the standards, the pressure with the constant turnover, as well, and that puts pressure on the players. So I actually would say, to answer my own question, I actually think the rot set in when the game first went pro, Fitzy, at the club. And the club's
Maybe.
never really balanced, and there's always been cycles. Like you had Dick Best, I think, 2001, and then you had you in 2009. So yeah, I mean, there's a great lesson there for leadership. I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
Topsy. I can't wait to
Well,
analyze it. Actually,
yeah, it's a funny one because actually, as you say that, and you talk about cycles is the word. Because actually, if you think about, see, we're fast forwarding a bit, but at the point where the club went into administration, coming up 3 years ago now, they'd gone from not spending money on the squad to spending all the money on the squad, built a fantastic squad with a great group of young players coming through. They just qualified for Europe. but obviously you're now spending too much money and still not making money, and then the club goes under. So you sacrifice money and results go. You spend money, you get the results, but you lose the business. So your point around actually where the foundations, I think obviously definitely when the game went pro, the way it was set up, like again, it's kind of the walking joke. Who's making money in this sport? No one, really and truly. Who's making money out of this? And that's no way to be. We see it a lot in sports in the UK, not just in rugby, but for a sport that's not the main sport in this country to operate for the best part of 30 years and not be profitable is worrying. So then when you've got these cycles of we're spending money, we're successful, but the business is fragile. Okay, we'll sort the business out, but then results go. So then you push it all the way the other way. So yeah, and it's something that rugby's dealing with now. I think if you look at how the league is now going to change and move towards a franchise model in 29, 30, it's a radical decision, to almost effectively split the top of the English pyramid away. But that decision is born out of the fact that as a business structure, rugby has failed in allowing its clubs to really make money since it turned pro. So now this is the solution that's hopefully going to resolve that, but it's still 3 years down the track, and it's still going to be reliant on investors coming in to the hope that then businesses can start to become a bit more sustainable. So yeah, we're getting into it now. It is a long-term problem within the sport, and maybe this will be part of the solution to fix it. But there's so much going on within that as well that you probably need to address too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where do you sit personally on that decision to go away from promotion and relegation into a franchise model?
Yeah, it's a tough one for me. Like obviously, I know guys in both camps. Like I do understand the decision, but I would love to, or I would like to see the drawbridge not closed up completely. I think that's something quite unique with what we have, and I know other countries make it work, but I mean, I think if you could create that and still have a way that you get the special moments you get with promotion and relegation, I think you can still tap into something quite unique. Now, again, I know from an investor point of view, if you're looking to secure your investment, you don't want the threat of relegation and sponsors pulling out and losing money. And yeah, I understand that from a business point of view. I guess, we all wonder, if you could create everybody looks at what France is doing now with, successful top 14, Pro D2 and all of that. I know their model is very different. The way the clubs are owned, the way that the communities support their rugby team is very, very different. We have football, so, way more competition. I know they do too, but different degree. But yeah, I understand franchising. I think it will appeal to a lot of new investors. You see Red Bull come on board. You see James Dyson come on board in more capacity. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen it done with a way that doesn't cut off the rest of the pyramid.
Yeah,
Because I guess how do those guys aspire to do what maybe Exeter did? Are Exeter going to be the only club to ever be able to climb the pyramid and cement themselves at the top? As it stands, probably yes.
Mm.
yeah. It's an
Yes.
interesting one, that, and where you find a solution to give clubs, because the business people will say there's franchises, they don't want relegation. They're
No,
investing in it,
absolutely not.
but there is excitement in the promotion and relegation for the supporters. But it's hard. Like how do you get that solution? I don't know. Maybe Fitzy knows the answer to that. I don't.
I don't know if I know the answer, but I'm a big fan of the franchise model. I think that yes, and we've been in promotion and
I think it's the only
relegation
logical
battles,
way,
and
Fitzy.
there is a lot
Yeah,
of excitement, and it's certainly in the sort of European DNA. But if we go back to the point we were talking about there in terms of stadiums, owning stadiums, setting that foundation, that business model. You've got to have a medium to long-term plan and investment strategy to do that. And that doesn't happen if you always live in hand to mouth, not knowing if, you have a few bad decisions, few injuries, a bit of bad luck, and all of a sudden you're at the bottom end of the table and staring down the barrel of a relegation. So yeah, I can see it for both sides, but I think for the long-term sustainability, it's the way, the light, and the truth. So let's change tack. Let's talk about transition and life after rugby. So you retired in 2019. You've built a serious broadcasting career: ITV, Six Nations reporter, World Cup coverage, Premiership rugby, Amazon, TNT Sports. It's a pretty storied resume you've got there, Topsy. You didn't come out of playing with a World Cup winner or 50 caps. You've carved out a genuine presence on the biggest stages. What did you learn or unlearn to make that transition work for you?
Well, it's I'd say the biggest thing I learned is kind of dealing with a different sort of pressure. There's nothing quite like live TV, where you've got to hit your marks. You've got lots of moving parts in and around you anyway, from maybe the players warming up to groundsmen to other camera crew to having 4 different people talking to you at one point. You're trying to have a conversation with your guest. You've got producer, director in your ear. You've got all sorts going on, stadium PA. So to be able to kind of work under those pressures and deliver the job, that's the biggest thing. I enjoy it, which is again almost paramount. Do you enjoy the work you're doing? And I do. It's a brilliant environment to be in, working in live sport. Took a while, like you say, to build it to where it is now. And again, it's similar to a playing career. It's a roller coaster. Sports broadcasting rights change so often. If they fall in your favor, it can be great. If they don't, all of a sudden earnings drop, and when earnings drop and standard bills don't, that's something that self-employed broadcasters have to deal with. Obviously your salary can fluctuate month to month, year to year, but mortgages, electric bills, insurances, and all of that are staying the same, if not going up. So you always have to balance that out. But I think without knowing it, I'd got some practice in while I was still a player, in terms of if you were ever injured or not selected, particularly for home games, you had the opportunity to go and do local radio. I think I remember the first couple of years of my career was actually a way to avoid going to sponsors, which you're like, I'd rather go do local radio. Of course, you learn very quickly that your sponsors are important, and their investment stabilizes the club. So go and do your due diligence, go and spend time with them, go and make friends. But yeah, by the time it came to me retiring, I'd done a decent handful of commentaries. I'd, if ever Sky was showing a game, Sky who had it at the time, and I wasn't involved, I'd say I'll happily do interviews. I'll happily speak to you during the week. I laugh with one of the club's old media managers now. He'd say, "You were good because you just said yes." Whereas others, they were like, "I don't want to be in front of the camera. I don't want to do this." But obviously, little did I know. I mean, I enjoyed it then, but little did I know I was building up the confidence to do that. So then in retirement, to be able to approach BT, 5 Live at the time, and say, "Look, this is what I want to do," and for them to give me opportunities. I was raw, untested. So again, you're waiting for an opportunity. Again, without knowing it, timed it well in that when I retired in 2019, it was the World Cup. So all their main broadcasters disappeared to Japan for 6, 7 weeks while the Premiership was still ongoing. So there were actually a lot of dates to be filled. So after my first game, which was, I think it was a late call up on a Friday night to do a Prem Cup fixture, Gloucester, I think it was 11-8, low scoring game in the rain, back when we had low scoring games. We don't do those anymore. And yeah, I made a few mistakes, of course. There's a button that you press that takes you off air that you speak to the director with. I didn't press that button, so they almost had to cut my mic off and say, "Don't forget to press the button." I was like, sorry. But did a good enough job that they offered me more work, and then you kind of start to build a portfolio. So you get to work for TV with BT, you get to do some radio stuff, and then as rights change and things move, again, you still have to ask or try and be given an opportunity. Big one probably came. Actually, I'll go back because actually then the big kicker then was COVID. So then you have a load of dates in the diary, COVID hits, everything gets pushed, and you think, right, I might not get those dates back because, you're kind of covering for people who aren't available, or, some they give to you anyway. But then after COVID, it all came back. You're getting to do more. It's going from maybe once a month, once every 2 weeks to every week. I guess the big turning point would have been when ITV came on board. So I remember at the time I was, you shoot your shot, don't you? And I'd sent a couple of emails to ITV asking about Six Nations, trying to shoot for the top. It was like, we don't have anything for the Six Nations. We're using our usual guys. But not long after that, they said, actually, we have just signed a deal to take on some Premiership rights and produce a highlight show. Would you like to be involved in that? And that's probably where things then jump to the next level in terms of, you are broadcasting every single weekend. You're doing different mediums, different forms. Your point around not having caps and World Cups, I think, again, almost long-term planning. I knew that going into it. I knew that every time I walk onto a set, there's a World Cup winner there, there's a Premiership winner there. So my goal, ambition was to be able to do any job on the day that needed doing, from presenter to reporter to co-coms, so that if I needed to move chair, I could do so and it would be seamless. So, even now there's quite a good mix. I'd say the reporting role with ITV is my main job, but there's a lot of live presenting involved with that as well. And that's a part of the job that I really love. But hopefully it's something that I've been able to carve out that's a bit of my own, because lots of people will want to be pundits, but they might not necessarily want to present, report, co-coms. So being able to do all the different elements of the broadcast hopefully put me in a place where I could secure more of my workload. Now, like I say, that changes when rights change, but you hope at least you do everything you can. And then if it's just somebody's decision, you don't like it because it's food off your table, but you're doing all you can. You're speaking to different people, working in different environments, and trying to carve out a career for yourself.
That's
I'll tell you
fascinating.
what I like hearing about. I mean, I was going to say it's a genuine, like you've finished playing rugby 16 odd years and then you're making a transition, but it's a genuine passion you seem to have for broadcasting, which comes out in spades. Would you say, Vincy?
Absolutely, and I was going to say what also comes out for there for me is, I mean, you set yourself a goal of what you wanted to do. The hustle comes through in spades, right? Which as we know, is a cornerstone if you want to be good at anything, whether it's a winger scoring against the All Blacks or as a broadcaster, that positive opportunity attitude to hunt that opportunity. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, funny story. Well, I say funny. My very first meeting with BT. So it was my last season. I think it would be season before. Basically, I just pulled my hamstring quite badly, so I was on crutches, and I basically hobbled my way to Waterloo to go and meet with an exec at BT, because I was like, you're getting into the last years of your contract and you're doing 1-year deals as opposed to 3-year deals. So you are thinking this could end at any moment. So yeah, I was like, right, I can't hang about. I kind of need to get this show on the road. And yeah, that was my very first interaction. And yeah, hustle is true because predominantly we are all self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a competitive environment that loads of people want to work in, and there's only so many jobs. So you have to keep at it. You have to keep going. You have to make friends. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It is just, as people said to me over the last couple of years, it's just the nature of the environment sometimes is work doesn't come your way. But then no different to playing. Sometimes you might hit a purple patch where work does come your way now. And, I look at, where ITV now have all of England's international games for the next 4 years. For me, that could be an incredible opportunity. So, you don't take it for granted, but you kind of say, okay, if we can continue to do the work, continue to work hard, enjoy it, and create something for yourself, then all of a sudden the kids can eat again.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I think that's as well, what you just made an incredibly valuable point, not just, and we talk a lot about transition and transitioning out from playing when you've been in that, I would say, cosseted environment of a bubble of a professional sports team. It doesn't, it's still incredibly hard work, but you're very, very, very much catered for. But having a look, as you just explained there, over the horizon, thinking, okay, that this journey is coming to an end sooner or later, and having that preparation and foresight to prepare for the transition, knowing what you wanted to do, and then going after it and hustling it, and and as you were saying there, learning all the different skills so you could give yourself the best possible opportunity to succeed in the place that you wanted to succeed in.
Yeah, it's a big conversation at the minute, that whole transition piece. It's difficult. It's really difficult. And I know even people would look at me and say, you've carved out this amazing career, you're flourishing. And I say, it's going well at the minute. But there are bumps in the road, without people knowing it. The last 2 years haven't been as good as the previous 3 or 4. And they've not been as good as what I hope this next year will be. So you kind of have to ride those waves. Um, like I say, I knew that I wanted to work in media, and I also knew that I wanted to coach. Those were kind of my 2 avenues, hence me starting at St. John's School as well. So I thought, right, there's a role at a school that gives me some security in a job that I want to do and enjoy and explore. That could lead to me perhaps becoming a director of sport or something along those lines if the broadcasting didn't go the way I wanted to. But yeah, it was to figure out what I wanted to do, go after those 2 avenues with everything I can, and then hopefully get to a point where, you know, the path is a lot clearer. Now, as it is, I'm still doing both because they complement each other really well. You know, my school, it's great, and almost they like now sending me off saying, go do this, go do that. We know you've got this side to you, and like we appreciate that. But also they've been great for me in terms of allowing me to go and do that. But the two environments work. They've complemented each other, and actually I think both have helped me because I say I can go from one weekend working on an international game to the next weekend coaching an under-12 team. So you're kind of full circle, grassroots right to the very elite, and trying to kind of bridge the gap between the two. So yeah, there's merit in that for sure. And it's the most difficult piece I think around transitioning, like figuring out what it is that you want to do and how you do it. And you can be the best prepared, and it still becomes very difficult because this bubble of elite sport is unique. It creates some pretty unique opportunities, the opportunity to do something special in a small window. And when you come out of that, you do well to find something that replaces those emotions, those moments. So you have to find something else that gives you similar, but another drive, another purpose that can keep you fulfilled.
what one quite quick question, Topsy, before we go into the quick fire, because I know time's going on a bit for you. The London Irish Foundation, how important has that been as well, do you think, in your transition? I mean, I said at the start, you played 16 years at London Irish, but you're also still involved with the London Irish Foundation. And has that helped you with the transition as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say, kind of built this portfolio career now where you're doing a few different bits and pieces. But I became a trustee from when I retired. The foundation being attached to the club was something that I definitely wanted to give back to and invest in. Obviously took on the interim chair role just before Christmas as well as our old chair, Paddy Lennon, was stepping down. Again, partly because I care about it and I wanted to invest in it and to succeed, but then also from a personal point of view to kind of continue that development. I think, again, talking about transition, you need to explore what you want to do outside of that sphere of just playing sport, and what it's like to sit on a board, what it's like to run a business. You almost have to figure that out for yourself. even talk about starting my bar, over the last few years as well. Luckily I had a business partner to help do that, but we'd never started a business before. We didn't know, what it takes to run a business, what it takes to, generate profits from, ordering stock to generating event, all those bits and pieces that people don't see. They just see the event at the end. They don't see the early nights, the late nights, the early mornings, and all of that. So that's important as well, I think. But yeah, the foundation was, yeah, part something that I really wanted to do, but also in terms of adding an extra string to my bow, giving me a bit more experience, a bit more senior leadership positions. And yeah, that's something that I guess maybe this now next stage of my career wanting to do as well, because, again, talking about building that second career, having a certain amount of security alongside the volatility that is broadcasting, I think is important.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's get into the quick fire, Topsy. Okay, don't overthink it. First thing that comes into your head. One word that defines London Irish change dressing room on its best day.
Special.
I would agree with that. The coach who pushed you the hardest, and was he right?
Toby Booth, and yes, he was. Yeah, there's some sessions which I won't remember fondly, but they got the job done.
Fair enough. Best day in the London Irish shirt.
It's weird because it is the day we lost, but yeah, that 2008 semi-final against Toulouse was just, yeah, from obviously having it at Twickenham. We just used the bottom tier, but there were just flags everywhere. Absolutely felt like a home game. Playing against the giants of Toulouse with all their internationals, and yeah, we went toe to toe with them for 80 minutes. And yeah, despite the loss, like I say, I think that was probably the game that propelled me towards the England tour. And yeah, it was just an enjoyable game of rugby to be part of.
Why was that, Topsy? Just out of interest, why was Jersey a difficult place
I
to
don't
play?
know, because it's just, I guess the island, or everybody rallied around the team, and I guess as the team that's come down from the Premiership, you're the ones with the target on your back. So it was a big day. You fly over the night before, you do everything right, and yeah, we just got sucker punched. They played better than us, and they deservedly won it. And
Yeah,
yeah, you're like,
they're
it's just the way it is.
baying for blood, basically.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Last question. You've got 301 appearances for London Irish, a record try tally, a bar named after it, a punditry career. If you had to pick just one thing that lasts, what would it be?
That's a hard one. I'll tell you what, I would probably say the 301 appearances, because that's in the history books. Unfortunately, as things stands, but yeah, it is. It's in the history books forever. Nobody will ever take that away from me. I hope and pray that somebody does have the opportunity to do so, but those 301 appearances set me on the path to do everything that I've done since. And like I say, that's something that I'll have forever, that nobody can ever take away from me.
Good answer. Well, Topsy, this has been excellent. 16 years, one club, one city, and a career that tells you a lot about things and keeps people inside a system when every signal leaves. Thank you very much for your honesty, for sharing your story and your transition. It's been a pleasure having you on the Business End. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Cheers,
Topsy.
guys. Thanks very much. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, love what you're doing. Yeah,
Thanks,
hope to see you both in person soon.
Yeah, thanks, Topsy.